Hello, good morning, and welcome from Washington. It's Wednesday, April the 29th. The King managed to ease transatlantic tensions at the state dinner last night after a masterful display in front of Congress of English humour that hit the spot, even with sometimes querulous hosts. My name is Anne McElroy from Politico.
And I'm Sam Coates of Sky News. Days of angst over the transatlantic relationship, heaping pressure on Keir Starmer's administration. The Mandelson affair resurfacing like Groundhog Day, time and again. And now private comments from the new British ambassador, who said that if anyone has a special relationship with the US, it's Israel, have cast a long shadow. But even from here in London, it looked like the British state did what it best at when they put the King front and centre.
Well, yes, and he certainly enjoyed delivering those zingers in the speech, ribbing President Trump over his recent claim that if it weren't for the United States, European countries would be speaking German.
Dare I say that if it wasn't for us, you'd be speaking French.
Then referencing Trump's controversial plan to rebuild part of the White House into a ballroom under the president's name. He added,
And I'm sorry to say that we British, of course, made our own small attempt at real estate redevelopment of the White House in 1814.
The search is on to hand the laurels to the speechwriter who pulled some of those gags together, but King Charles himself plainly enjoying delivering an address. It was courteous, it was punchy, and it landed very well indeed. The senior senator, Lindsey Graham, saying the King nailed it. And it was a bit of a nobody puts the UK in a corner moment too.
I do think those jokes are tailored for a sort of Trump administration audience. They were clever. Let's hope that the same speechwriter gets another go for the King's speech in May in the House of Lords. We'll return to events back at home in a moment, but the royal visit is a political moment. I know many listeners will know this and feel it's like spelling out the obvious, but the visit might be organised by Buckingham Palace, but it's done hand in glove with the Diplomatic Service, the Foreign Office and Number 10. And the visit not only has Keir Starmer's backing, it's the consequence of that invite letter that the PM handed over in the Oval Office in February 2025, happier times, but is designed to help his government's goal. So his absolutely every inch of it is crawled over and initiated by the Foreign Office and Number 10.
And for his part, President Trump brought politics into it as well, following a private meeting with Charles in the Oval Office on Tuesday, saying of the conflict in Iran, which Britain opposes, we're doing a little Middle East work right now, and we're doing it very well. We have militarily defeated that particular opponent. We're never going to let that opponent ever. And he then goes on to say, Charles agrees with me even more than I do. We're never going to let that opponent have a nuclear weapon. British officials quick to say the president's comments are in line with our own government policy, though it's the means to the end that are really the issue here.
Absolutely. Is the most important thing that President Trump came away thinking that Charles agrees with him, quite possibly. So in the past, if you remember, Anne, President Trump had suggested that there was some division between the King and Keir Starmer, who's currently on the diplomatic naughty step. But I think some good vibes were much in need. There was a one downer on the state visit yesterday, and that was courtesy of the Financial Times, who published leaked remarks by the new ambassador to Washington, Christian Turner. He was recorded speaking to school children a couple of months ago, actually. Somebody did the recording and then sat on it. And in this recording, Christian Turner seemed to range somewhat clumsily over a number of unwise and controversial topics. Some of the sort of officials and diplomats that I was talking to would just say they would stay clear of in almost all circumstances. And then the recording was released to designed to cause maximum damage yesterday. So they included him saying the Prime Minister's future looked, quote, quite touch and go, and that Labour could remove the Prime Minister. And then, this is sort of contrary to what Downing Street want to hear, that the vetting saga around Peter Mandelson was a, quote, red herring, and it was Peter Mandelson's embarrassing associations rather than his security concerns that meant he was sacked. Taking into account that and everything else in the last sort of 24 hours, where do you think we are now going forward with our friends in Washington?
I think the success through of the Charles speech here, Sam, did help eclipse what was clearly a moment of oversharing by a communicative new ambassador in front of school children here. Just listening to what you're saying there about the topics that Christian Turner touched on. The defense that some people have been putting up, and I think some people in the Foreign Office have been quick to say this, is well, these things are true. They're in plain sight. There are lots of things we talk about on the podcast every day. It's just there is a difference, apparently, between being a podcast host and being an ambassador. And perhaps in this case, there was a bit of, overstepping there. But the royals head to New York for a wreath-laying ceremony today. Christian Turner also along for that, so he can have any private conversations on the side that might arise. But the real point here is the solemn part, the commemoration of 9/11. The King will brush shoulders with Zoran Mamdani, the mayor of New York, and a Winnie the Pooh moment for Queen Camilla. She'll be at New York Public Library celebrating the greatest bear ever in history. Before a glam reception, Yvette Cooper will be meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and there was that Pentagon memo to discuss, suggesting the UK's claims to the Falklands might be in doubt. But I'm hearing really that it's NATO, Ukraine, and trying to get to a perhaps more settled state about how the UK can contribute on whatever the day after is in the Straits of Hormuz are the central topics.
Fascinating. We'll see how they all pick it up. One more word on Christian Turner. Just some views on either side of the Atlantic on what they think back here in government, in Whitehall. I think the idea that Christian Turner is incautious has taken hold at the top of government, and that there is a sense that he occasionally needs to be reined in a bit, which is extraordinary how short he's been in post. But effectively, he's protected because of the wider political circumstances. And I think there is also a sense elsewhere that he needs to get on with making closer friends around the top of the Trump administration. So I think there's a long to-do list for him, but he couldn't have had a sort of greater shove in the right direction by the king.
One thing that I don't doubt, just having been around the embassy in these days and just sort of seeing how it's been rolling in practice, and obviously Turner alongside His Majesty the King there, and having conversations around his staff, is I don't think there's any sense that he doesn't think that this is serious and that there's serious business to be done after the visit. If anything, and a bit ironically, given that it's been party time at the British Embassy, I think he feels that there is some settling down to be done, and that there's really serious business to be done, and that underneath all of this, the transatlantic relationship is not in its best state. So I don't think anyone, well, at least that I'm talking to from this side, is doubt he did get that job for a reason. And I think one thing he did say is that it's great to have this convening power in Washington, but we probably need to get deeper and deeper into some diplomacy that can restabilize the relationship once the King and Queen have gone. But yeah, absolutely. Someone who perhaps had spent more time in places where you can wander about and say things, it's not going to get picked up. I mean, Washington, everybody's on some form of listening device, or everybody, even in a school setting, everybody's kids in the classroom, or the kids of someone else who can go and tell stories. And I think the recording will have been quite a warning.
Back in Westminster, I think Keir Starmer is going to use a final bonus Prime Minister's questions at lunchtime today to present his full spectrum and ultimately successful effort to block a privileges inquiry into whether he knowingly lied to the Commons over the Mandelson affair into a political success. That was the message that ministers were being pushed out with last night, and no doubt that'll continue this morning. Just a reminder of the numbers on this, pretty existential vote for Keir Starmer. There are 405 Labour MPs and 333 of them voting it down. So 16 voted for an inquiry, including 2 tellers, and 53 abstained. Now, some of the abstentions were kind of authorised. Yvette Cooper is in Washington, for instance, but some, like Louise Haigh, I don't think would quarrel with the idea that she was consciously absent from backing the Prime Minister. That's just a slightly higher number, 53 plus 16, than I think you would have wanted. It was still a comfortable victory, of course it was, but it gets close to that 80, which, if they turn against the Prime Minister and stand behind the challenger, is the magic number. However, it's not there yet. Effectively, all questions of leadership get pivoted to the other side of the local elections, and Keir Starmer will do his best to present all of this as a stunt that failed at PMQs.
Members of the government putting an optimistic face on all of that, some even calling it a good day, but I suppose it's all relative these days for the Prime Minister. One minister telling Playbook that the Tories may have done Starmer a favour in the short to medium term, at least by flushing this out, considering the vote could have gone differently if a swathe of crucial elections hadn't just been a week away.
Yeah, and that's the point, right? The timing is everything. At this stage, though, I think people will take away from yesterday's mammoth evidence session on the Mandelson affair and the early evening vote pretty much what they want. I rather thought that ex-Chief of Staff Morgan McSweeney's evidence was pretty deft, low-key, and avoided the bear traps and being riled by Chair Emily Thornberry. So I thought he handed little to his critics. Ex-Foreign Office boss, who we also heard from yesterday, Philip Barton, avoided any kinetic moments. But I was quite struck that overall, my view was that he did little to back the Keir Starmer version of events over the sacking of Ollie Robbins. So I wouldn't put it down as a win for number 10. Overall, where are we left from the shenanigans of yesterday? Well, I sort of think the same as I thought yesterday morning. Keir Starmer expended a lot of political capital ensuring that he won, and won pretty comfortably. But there's only so many times that you can push that button and ask everybody to rally to your side, particularly if you're in a bit of political trouble. How do you think it looked from where you sat?
I thought it was interesting in the bigger picture that Charles used that phrase, which I didn't think I'd heard from him before, my Prime Minister, which I think was just a way of certainly not small p political defence of Keir Starmer, which isn't his job and he would never do, but just a kind of reminder to the Trump administration. It's a constitutional monarchy, Prime Minister and the monarch are connected. So, don't be too nasty to my Prime Minister, as he put it.
Can I just put a little counterpoint there?
Yeah.
Keir Starmer has been known to call it my government. So you could also read that as just a slight tweak of the tail of the Prime Minister, reminding him who's in charge as well.
Well, it is Matryoshkas, isn't it, in a constitutional monarchy? I think tonally he was just a bit like, he's my Prime Minister after all. Anyway, a lot of capital needed to be expended back in the UK, and I think that is one thing that was noticed from here, that you had the King talking about Britain in the world. It was a serious speech, ultimately, despite all those great jokes. It was really saying none of us will be forgotten or forgiven if we get these difficult times wrong. And I think there was that sense that was where people's eyes were over here. But when you got back to what the Prime Minister, whoever he is, what he was up to back in the UK, you're just right. Such a lot of capital had to be expended in order to save his skin on this one. I think there was a solidarity feeling that Playbook reported afterwards in Strangers Bar, with Wes Streeting, Jonathan Reynolds, John Healey toasting the end of the legislative push. Right, always good to have a barroom end to a chapter, but you'd expect that at this stage, wouldn't you, in a government, Sam? We've been celebrating getting through to some very difficult piece of legislation, a milestone for Labour in office, not just for having seen off an attempt to haul the Prime Minister in front of the Privileges Committee.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of legislation just got rammed through. Hillsborough law just got kicked through to the next session. Some compromises were done on pension stuff. There's a lot of legislation that's been done just before prorogation. But the whole of the story is where it goes next. Now, interestingly, The Telegraph have a splashy story about Angela Rayner talking about how there's a discussion already underway about whether or not she returns to cabinet. I actually heard something pretty similar from allies of Angela Rayner just yesterday. Somebody saying to me, her tax affairs are very, very nearly sorted, and they're hopeful that that'll all happen before the local elections next week. And suggesting to me that at that moment, where the Prime Minister went to Ashton-under-Lyne with Andy Burnham, there was some kind of discussion about her. Maybe she could return to the fold. There could be a reshuffle. I was hearing maybe Monday, May the 11th. The Telegraph was hearing maybe even the Saturday, 2 days after the local elections. If there is a reshuffle, I continue to predict Rachel Reeves stays in post. But I think bringing Angela back would be the main point of it if there was one. What do you make of it?
For a start, I make of it that the phrase "her tax affairs are nearly sorted" is the Zeno's paradox of Angela Rayner's studies. You know, the arrow that she never reaches the wall because it's always, you half the distance at any given time. It never really happens. At space at some point bound to happen. So that would, of course, free up Rayner for a return. But thinking back to that school visit that you mentioned, if you remember, we ended up with Angela Rayner, Andy Burnham, and the Prime Minister, which is, quite a lot of people to throw at the year sixes or year fours or whatever it was. They were littles, weren't they? But you could sort of see a limited reshuffle. It would leave Reeves in place, as you suggested yesterday, but it then still takes you into the world of who does Angela Rayner replace? I mean, certainly what I had heard from people who want her to return is that she's also setting some terms here. There's some roles that she's saying she wouldn't particularly want, and there's some that would certainly be so troublesome to others that you would be knocked into a much bigger reshuffle. So I think it's going to be tempting to bring her back, Sam, so she's not firing pot shots from outside cabinet quite as liberally as she has been doing. But it's still not totally clear what you bring her back to do and how you then avoid it becoming the bigger reshuffle, even if that wasn't the intention.
Yeah, I think that's good. You can see a world in which it benefits both sides, though. Having Angela Rayner bound by collective responsibility on this government, unless she then goes on to dramatically resign, I think would be quite helpful because her interventions have been targeted and often painful. But from her point of view, I think she needs something because her reputation with the wider public needs a bit of rehabilitation, and a cabinet position is a bit of a roll of the dice in that regard. What do I mean? Well, I've been looking again at the polling, and it's not great for her. Asked who would do a better or worse job than Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, and by the way, what you do is you get a net figure by taking the percentage of people who say that they do a better job and subtract the people that say they do a worse job. Only Andy Burnham seems to improve the view of Labour. Andy Burnham comes out in positive territory as potentially doing a better job with a net positive 21. Angela Rayner comes out like really quite close to bottom on -23, equal to Ed Miliband, less good than Wes Streeting on -9 and Shabana Mahmood on -17. She needs something to show the wider public that, she's a figure worth trusting. Because although lots of clever people will say, yes, but it's Labour members who decide who the next, Labour MPs to a certain extent who decide who the next Prime Minister is. In the end, if you change, you only change leader if you're an MP, or want to change leader if you're an MP, if you think it gives you a better chance at the ballot box next time around. And as the figures stand, it's not her.
I suppose from the Rayner position, you could say she's going to poll weakly in the position when the tax affairs aren't sorted and she's off the pitch, that she shines when she's on the pitch, and that maybe those numbers could warm up if she had some good zinger moments, added some of that, the great red-headed magic that she has been able to bring to the role at the moment. I think she's coming across as a bit, she's carping, and she's clearly carping from a position on the left. Would it be a slightly more a benign position for her if she actually had a job and was bound into cabinet? We don't know until she got there, but she clearly, I think, does want to come back. Labour MPs, you make a good point. The question is, do they always get that call right? And yes, this time Keir Starmer was was saved. But do they think collectively in terms always as clearly as they might about what is going to follow when you hang on to someone who may not be the right person to take you into the next election, as well as the dangers of switching in and getting that call wrong? And it's just which way it goes now, isn't it? Basically, as we get towards the midpoint for Keir Starmer, can he make that case that he is their man?
Absolutely. I feel like we'll be in a better position to answer that question just the other side of the local elections. There's so much to come. The Commons will empty out later today until basically mid-May. We've got those local elections on May the 6th, maybe a reshuffle, yet more Mandelson documents. I say that with a heavy heart, some point in May. And then the King's speech, where we hope there's the return of the joke writer. So there's a lot to come in the coming days.
And some housekeeping from us. We'll be back tomorrow with a special Week to Go episode on the local elections. And we have an overview with Patrick English, great pollster from YouGov. Sam and I have been firing questions at him about how things are looking there across the regions and across the locals as a whole. So do tune in for that. It's a great primer.
And then Monday is a bank holiday, so there'll be no politics at Sam and Anne's then, but we'll be back Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday is an election day, so nothing then. But we've got special edition on Friday morning for the first tranche of results, all the analysis you need first thing at the normal time, and another bonus edition on Sunday where we know how the results have all wrapped up. So we will see you then for a bumper week next week.